So, about 5 years ago, I think 2018 was when I first started noticing it. I noticed a little bit of rectal bleeding and pain. And I have family members who have hemorrhoids, and I read about them online, and I was like, oh, I think it's just hemorrhoids. It's no big deal. And then in February of this year, I started just getting sick. I was crashing a lot, so I'd go for a week and then I'd have to crash all weekend, and then the fatigue happened during the week, so it wasn't just happening on the weekends. And every month that I just had this extreme fatigue that's gotten a lot worse. And then I started having bleeding again, but I just ignored it.
My first symptoms started from what I can remember, was in 2019. I remember it was like so vivid because it was one of my favorite DJs were playing at Red Rocks, and I was partying pretty hard. And I remember going to the bathroom and being in a lot of pain, like in my stomach area. So I went to the bathroom, and that's the first time I saw blood in my stool. But before that, it was always had like small like stomach issues, just never always thought it was IBS. And that's what I thought originally, like the blood in my stool was just like a symptom of like IBS.
I started to notice there was blood in my stool after I went to the bathroom, and it would last for a couple of days. And so I would Google it, and it would say that it could be anything from hemorrhoids to colon cancer. Like there was just so many things it could be, but naturally I'm just like, well, I don't have cancer, so it's probably hemorrhoids or something. As the years went on, it became easier to just kind of ignore the fact that I'm noticing the blood, because I didn't do anything about it, and it goes away. It comes back, but it goes away. And so I was like, it's fine.
I started having some strange symptoms, mostly like bowel related. So I was having like really frequent bowel movements, really like loose stools, really just, and it was just continuous. It wasn't like, when you're sick, you might have that go on for a few days. And so I ended up having just like a routine physical with my family doctor that was in November. And I brought it up. I was like, hey, I'm having these symptoms. Uh, just wanted to put on your radar. He's like, let's keep an eye on it for a little bit and see what happens and get back with me. Um, so needless to say, like over the next couple months, it mainly stayed the same. I didn't really see any improvement.
After I would eat big meals, I noticed a large, like in my left lower abdomen, heavy pain. And when I say pain, I mean like buckled over, like painful. And it was when I went to go have a bowel movement or anything, and it literally felt like things were trying to pass and they couldn't. And then very quickly, by February of 2024, every time I would start to eat, I was puking after I ate. Even with smaller meals or snacks, I was puking. Nausea, and again, I tried cutting out certain foods as well, because I'm like, maybe it is gluten, maybe it is, this is what my doctors were saying, but nothing was working. And the pain got so bad to the point where I would literally buckle over and just be gasping for air, because there was no relief no matter what I did.
I didn't have any symptoms actually. I just went to my primary care doctor to have my annual physical in November of 2023. And they ran blood work, and she called me like a couple of weeks later after my blood work and said, hey, you're anemic. And I was like, anemic? That doesn't sound right, because I had no signs of symptoms of anemia. At least as a nurse, I didn't see anything. Like I wasn't tired, eating ice, wasn't cold, working fine, sleeping well. So she said, I need you to see a hematologist because your blood levels are low. And then she had me come back and check my iron. And she says, your iron levels are like almost zero.
I also noticed my bowel habits had changed, just meaning I was feeling like I had to go to the bathroom so many times a day.
In 2022, I started getting like a really, really excruciating pain, like in my lower abdomen. And it was almost like a menstrual cramp, but way worse.
I was 26 at the time. I looked healthy. I seemed healthy. My blood work came back normal, but it doesn't mean that there's something else going on. And this is where a lot of people, especially in the younger age, are getting dismissed because they look and seem healthy and no one thinks cancer, right?
I was starting to gain weight. I've always been an avid gym girly, and just like active in my life in general. But at that point, I was starting to gain weight in my midsection, and I could not lose it, no matter how many like calorie deficient I was in, no matter how much like I wasn't drinking alcohol or anything like that. I was gaining weight in my midsection.
I had been having symptoms since like high school, a sensitive stomach and getting sick when I would eat certain foods, not feeling good, exhausted. And in high school, I went and got a scope done and everything looked fine. They didn't see anything, didn't diagnose me with anything. So we just kind of chalked it up as a sensitive stomach. And I just kept dealing with that for 10 plus years. And then we kind of just paused on seeking what the cause of me just feeling not great was. And then there was like 6 months that I was super exhausted. We normally like to get up early and work out or spend time together, have coffee, journal, read. And I was just like dragging. I could not wake up early. My body was so exhausted and I couldn't figure out why. And then I started to have blood in my stool.
I remember starting to have funky things happen with my bowel habits, but it would never be consistent. It would last for a day or two, and I would be like, like maybe there was a trace of blood, or I would just feel like my stool was off or different than normal. But then everything was fine for another month or two or three, and then all of a sudden I would have this more like an issue of blood.
I've always had stomach issues. And so I just, nothing felt unusual. I was staying the same weight. I was eating as usual, but I had this absolute extreme fatigue where I'm used to walking all over the city, picking up my kids 8 blocks away, going here, going there. And I just found myself deeply out of breath when I tried to walk 2 blocks.
I had stomach issues. My sister and I, whether it was lactose intolerance or whatever, we'd get stomach aches. And very commonly for us, we would eat something and then we would almost immediately go to the bathroom. It was just something that we always sort of did, and I didn't really pay that much attention to it. I then started to get really bad stomach issues later in my 20s and into my 30s. And so I went and saw a GI because I was having trouble finishing going to the bathroom. I would go to the bathroom and I would feel like there was more that needed to come out, but I would have to sit and wait for a little bit for it to come out.
I would say symptoms started a year or two before diagnosis. It started with a change in bowel habits, size, consistency, some blood in the stool, abdominal pain, kind of some acid reflux type reactions that my wife and I chalked up to aging, maybe being not as healthy as I could be at my age. My wife having IBS, I thought some of it was IBS. Some foods would just trigger some reactions in me.
I only had one, which was a very small change in my stool. It became slightly looser. It wasn't that, I think for most people, it's not that big of a deal. But for me, I hadn't changed my diet. I had the first time I noticed it, I had just come back from Spain, and I thought, maybe it was from traveling. And so I gave it a few weeks and it wasn't getting better. And my body, I listened to my body. So I said, this is a change.
My first symptoms was when I was pregnant when my symptoms started with my son. I want to say it was like in June of 2021. And I just started having some like blood in my stool, which pregnancy, they're just like, that's normal. You can have hemorrhoids. It's completely normal for that to happen. So I didn't think anything of it. And it just started progressively. I started to have a lot of really low back pain, and kind of just like some like pressure, like always feeling like I had to go to the bathroom. But again, they were like, well, your baby's sitting really low. He's sitting posterior. It's just pregnancy stuff. I had my son August 9th. And I remember, and this is like a lot of TMI, but I remember when I was in labor, I was having so much rectal pain, like just like severe, like contractions were nothing. And I just remember telling my husband, like, oh my gosh, like this hurts so bad. I feel like that there's no way this is just a hemorrhoid. Like this is so painful. And the kind of months after that were a little bit blurry. I really started to see more symptoms kind of in October, November-ish. I was having just really like every single bowel movement was bloody, and sometimes it would just be straight blood. It was just constant, and I was probably having like 15 to 20 bowel movements a day that were just blood. And I remember being like, okay, this is not normal. Something is not right here.
I was at work. It was a Friday evening. I will never forget it. And I was standing in front of the house that we were going to film in front of. And I felt like I had pulled a muscle in my side. And I remember saying to one of my friends at work, like, it feels weird because I didn't do anything that would have caused that feeling. And I Googled my symptoms, and Google told me that I had gas. And my sister later joked that I'm the only person that the internet did not tell that they had cancer. And so from March 1st on, I started getting shooting pains from my left side towards my middle, and they would become more frequent and more painful as the weeks went on.
I have been diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer. It was a accidental and I will say very lucky finding. I was scheduled to have a colonoscopy in January of 2024. Things were a bit crazy for us at the time, just because of a lot of things that were going on personally and financially. And at the time, was really stressed, and there was a lot of things going on. And I was like, I will do this later. So fast forward to the end of October, and I started having some bowel issues. I felt impacted and thought that I was constipated. But none of the over-counter remedies worked. So I ended up going into the urgent care where they did all their checks and said, yeah, let's did an x-ray. The x-ray techs were like, we don't really see anything major.
I went to the doctor and a PCP, and I told her that I couldn't get over this strep throat. And she said, okay, well, let's do some blood work. Your throat is a little bit red. And so she did blood work. And the next morning, she called me and she said, you need to get to the emergency room now. Your blood levels, your hemoglobin is so low that I honestly don't know how you're moving. And I do hear this a lot from women who've had colon cancer, because you become very anemic because of all the blood loss.
In retrospect, you look back and you think, I was so stupid, or I was afraid, or I was just in denial, whatever it was, but I did not get myself checked out. Looking back now, I should have known I was in trouble, but for all of the things I just listed, denial, fear, whatever, I just kind of pressed on. And it wasn't until I want to say it was 2021 when I remember I started to have a couple of issues where there was like more significant blood. Like I would have like bursts of diarrhea for no reason. But again, stupid denial. I would see that and I'd be like, okay, well, let's see if it happens again tomorrow.
I started showing one symptom and I had blood in my stool, and I knew instantly that I had colon cancer. Just blood in the stool and fatigue. And my friend's mom, who's a nurse, did a blood test on me, and she said I was very anemic. And what we ended up finding out when they had taken the tumor out is the blood flow was feeding the tumor. And that's why I was so anemic. And so I was actually able to see a GI in January of 2021. Same thing. She dismissed all my symptoms. And finally, I just said, listen, like, this isn't about you being right or me being right. This is about figuring out what's wrong. I think that I'm sick. And I said, what can we do? And she said, well, we can give you a colonoscopy. You're too young. And they're very expensive. And I said, well, I'm a teacher. I have great health insurance. I said, we need to do this. I said, I think it'll give me peace of mind knowing that we have tried everything. And so a month later, she did a colonoscopy and found the tumor.
My first symptoms were I had blood in my stool. I was actually in Florida in June celebrating my 50th birthday with all of my kids. And I kind of chalked it up to maybe it was something that I ate. Maybe it wasn't blood. I kind of talked myself out of it. I didn't have anything else than that, than just the blood in my stool, which I knew wasn't normal. But I thought it could be anything, really. Didn't think for a second that it was colon cancer. It wasn't necessarily every time at that point. It was probably maybe 2 or 3 times a week, but I wasn't losing any weight, so I really wasn't that concerned. Concerned enough to continue to call my primary doctor. I again saw them in July. I wanted blood work to see where my levels were at. I did at that point start to have some cramping in my stomach and maybe a little bit of bloating. But again, I just turned 50 in August, so I thought maybe it was menopause. Maybe it was just getting old. I really didn't think. I mean, I guess I associated cancer with low energy, losing weight, just not feeling well. And I felt really good, even though I was continually having blood in my stool.
Thank you so much for watching our video. You actually saw my mom, Kelly, in there. She was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer in November of 2023. I've actually queued up her video for you to watch. Please make sure you subscribe as well. We have new inspirational videos every single week. We want people to know they're not alone.